So a brand new study just dropped claiming that it finally debunks the Shroud of Turin, one of Christianity's most revered relics. Brazilian 3D expert Cicero Moraes says that he can now prove that the shroud never wrapped a real human body, let alone the body of Jesus Christ. Using state-of-the-art digital modeling, Moraes shows how the shroud's strikingly clear image perfectly matches what you'd expect from a cloth draped over a flat sculpture, not a three-dimensional corpse. The internet has completely lit up, media headlines are super dramatic, as you might expect, and skeptics are now calling it game over. But as compelling as Moraes' findings seem, there is a huge problem here, a critical flaw in his analysis that most reports have completely missed. And today we're diving into exactly what Moraes got right, what he got wrong, and why the Shroud of Turin might yet have survived another attempt to bury it. Hey, I'm Cameron Bertuzzi, and welcome to Capturing Christianity, where we expose the intellectual side of Christian belief. If you're new here, hit subscribe and buckle up, because this one is going to be both fascinating and actually visually stunning. All right, before we unpack all the very juicy details of Moraes' controversial study, let's briefly catch you up on why the Shroud of Turin matters so much to so many people. The shroud is widely believed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that wrapped the crucified body of Jesus Christ. It shows the hauntingly detailed image of a man bearing wounds exactly matching those described in the Gospels: pierced wrists, scourged back, wounds on the head from thorns, and even bloodstains consistent with Roman crucifixion. For decades, researchers have been fascinated by this relic. It's not just Christians who are intrigued by this. Even skeptics admit that the shroud is unlike anything we've ever seen in history. Its image isn't painted. There's no pigment, no dye, no ink. The image itself penetrates only the outermost surface fibers. It's incredibly superficial, thinner than a human hair. And perhaps most intriguingly, it actually encodes three-dimensional information, something completely unique in historical artifacts. In other words, it's not just an image, it's a kind of mysterious 3D photographic negative that no one has ever convincingly replicated, even with today's robust scientific technology. Recently, an X-ray scattering analysis from 2022 independently dated the shroud's fabric back to around 2,000 years ago, placing it squarely in the time of Christ. Now, if you're interested, I covered this new evidence a few months back. You can click on it right here. This analysis got a lot of people thinking, is the shroud finally being vindicated by modern science? Along comes Moraes and his groundbreaking, or maybe faith-shaking 3D study. But here's the twist. As convincing as his findings initially seem, once you dig just a little bit deeper, you'll realize that there's something very big that he's missing. We're going to cover that shortly. Don't go anywhere, because we are about to analyze Moraes' study step by step, explore what he got right, and expose what he missed. Real quick, if you're enjoying this content and want to see more videos just like this one, consider joining us over at Patreon. Creating videos that dive deep into the evidence for Christianity takes a ton of time, resources, and late-night research binges. By supporting Capturing Christianity on Patreon, you're directly helping us produce more in-depth analysis, interviews with experts, and detailed responses to objections just like this one. If you see value in what we're doing here and you can help out, head over to patreon.com/capturingchristianity to join today. Like, seriously, every little bit counts, and we genuinely cannot do this without you guys. All right, plug complete. Let's now dive headfirst into Cicero Moraes' bombshell study and see exactly why skeptics are so confident that they've finally debunked the Shroud of Turin. Cicero Moraes, a Brazilian expert renowned for reconstructing historical faces in stunning detail, decided to digitally simulate exactly how a cloth like the shroud would drape over different objects, specifically a real human body versus a sort of shallow sculpture like a medieval bas-relief. First, Moraes carefully built a digital 3D model of a human body, matching the proportions of the figure in the shroud. A male, approximately 33 years old, thin, and around 5 feet 11 inches tall. That's actually exactly how tall I am. He then meticulously posed this digital figure to mirror the exact positioning of the shroud image, as you can see in this figure. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Moraes took a digital linen cloth, accurately sized, and ran a fabric dynamic simulation, basically letting gravity drop the virtual cloth onto this 3D body digitally. After mapping the contact points, he flattened the digital cloth to see what kind of image that it produced. The results? They were actually pretty striking, but maybe not what shroud believers ever wanted to see. The simulation showed an image heavily distorted and widened. Moraeus likened it to Agamemnon's mask, the famously flattened golden mask from ancient Greece, where the face and body appear stretched unnaturally. This was nothing like the slim, proportional figure seen on the shroud. Then Moraeus tried a different approach, a shallow sort of bas-relief sculpture, simulating how medieval artists often worked. He repeated the same fabric simulation, and the result was astonishingly different. The imprint was clear, detailed, and precisely proportional, as you can see in this image. When overlaid onto actual images of the shroud, Moraeus found a near-perfect match. He concluded, the pattern corresponds more to a low-relief origin than to the volumetry of a real human body. According to Moraeus, this means the shroud is almost certainly the product of medieval craftsmanship, created by applying pigment or heat to the raised surfaces of a shallow sculpture. He even pointed out how common bas-relief funerary art was during the medieval period, particularly around the time the shroud actually first surfaced historically. His conclusion was very clear and very blunt. The remote possibility of the shroud being a print from a three-dimensional human body still remains. So in other words, Moraeus thinks it's almost virtually impossible for the shroud to be genuine. So is this truly the knockout blow that skeptics claim that it is? Before shroud believers throw in the towel, there's an enormous problem that Moraeus' research didn't address. Something so crucial, it might completely change how we interpret his results. Before we get to that fatal flaw, let's actually quickly cover what his critics are saying about this new research. Okay, almost immediately after Moraeus' study dropped, scholars pointed out several key oversights. Russ Brolt, a shroud lecturer and researcher, flatly said this, quote, "The work of Cicero Moraeus offers no new information that we didn't already know before." And he's actually right about this. Okay, shroud experts have known for decades that a simple cloth-to-body contact couldn't produce the image that we see on the shroud. Moraeus himself even acknowledged that he didn't address the microscopic or chemical characteristics of the image. He focused strictly on geometry and distortion. So here's why this matters. Okay, studies from the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP, back in 1978, already demonstrated conclusively that there's no pigment, dye, or scorch marks causing the image. The image itself penetrates only the very outermost fibers, an impossible feat for medieval artists. Moreover, STURP showed that the bloodstains came first, before the body image was formed. How could a medieval forger possibly accomplish that kind of precision? And here's something even more significant that Moraeus didn't consider, the so-called cloth collapse hypothesis, proposed by physicist Dr. John Jackson. Jackson theorized that a radiant burst of energy during the resurrection could have projected the body's image vertically onto the cloth without lateral distortion. So in other words, Moraeus assumed that the image had to result from direct contact, which shroud scientists have known for decades simply isn't the case. 3D imaging expert Ray Downing, known for his Real Face of Jesus documentary, summarized it bluntly. Moraeus used off-the-shelf 3D software to state the obvious and grab headlines, without addressing the deeper mysteries like the perfect encoding of subtle 3D data, no residual materials on the cloth, or how parts of the image formed without even touching the body. Having heard now from the critics, let's now turn to the critical flaw in Moraeus' research. As compelling as Moraeus' visuals might seem, his research overlooks one of the most puzzling and famous features of the shroud, the digital negative phenomenon. Let's slow down for a second because, well, what exactly do we mean by digital negative? Well, when you snap a photo on an old school film camera, what you first see is a negative image, something like this. Notice how the lights and darks are actually reversed. Light areas look dark, dark areas look bright. Now, when you reverse these tones or invert these tones, the result is a positive image that your eye recognizes immediately. In 1898, the photographer Secondo Pia took the first ever photograph of the shroud, expecting a sort of ordinary relic photo, but when he actually looked at the negative plate, he was stunned. Staring back at him wasn't this vague silhouette that he anticipated, but a very clear, lifelike portrait. Absolutely amazingly, the negative of the shroud became the positive portrait of the mysterious man that it depicted. It's like the shroud itself was already some kind of photographic negative. No one knows how. Something absolutely unheard of in the Middle Ages and extremely difficult to reproduce even today. But it gets even stranger. The shroud image doesn't just have like inverted tones, it actually encodes 3D distance information. When researchers digitally map the brightness of the shroud image onto height values, a clear three-dimensional representation of a human body emerges, like the iconic 3D rendering that you see here. This means that the intensity of the shroud's image directly correlates to the distance between cloth and body, producing depth even in areas where the cloth never physically touched the body. And that's something no simple contact imprint or print-based forgery could ever achieve. Now let's circle back to Moraes' study. Okay, his method reduces the shroud's image down to a sort of binary scenario. Either the cloth touched the body or it didn't. Look again at his simulation images, okay? See how every point on his model is either red for contact or blue for no contact. This binary approach can't even begin to account for grayscale intensity variations, the very thing needed to produce the negative in its associated 3D effect. In other words, Moraes' study focuses entirely on geometric fit, how the cloth sort of drapes over an object, but it completely sidesteps the crucial question of how the image actually formed with its photographic characteristics. So here's the bottom line. All right, Moraes may have convincingly argued that a full body contact scenario doesn't fit the shroud. Fine. That idea was largely discarded decades ago. No one thinks that. He claims that a low relief bas relief fits better geometrically, but fitting an outline isn't remotely the same as reproducing the photographic negative effect. Because Moraes' method ignores the most remarkable feature of the shroud, it leaves the central mystery completely untouched. And that oversight is not minor, it's absolutely fatal. No study can truly claim to debunk the Shroud of Turin without even attempting to explain its defining characteristics. Okay, Moraes' model, compelling visuals aside, never had a chance to pass that crucial test. But hey, what do you guys actually think about this? Is this new study as groundbreaking as the headline suggests? Did I get it wrong, or is the shroud still standing strong? Drop your thoughts below. Until next time, I'm Cameron Bertuzzi, and Christianity is true.